All right, if you have your Bible, Ecclesiastes chapter number 10. So, before we get there, I'm not going to bust anybody out, but somebody called me after last week and asked me a question, and it was a really good question, actually. And so, I want to share something with you. Someone called me and asked me, Eric, where is the line between folly and drama and wisdom, right? So where is that line in the middle that we kind of have to say, okay, this is going this way toward folly and it needs to be going the other way. And here's what I told him. The when you're on that line, the question that you need to ask is, and this goes into what we're talking about tonight, the question you need to ask is this situation and circumstance, because everybody has drama, right? There's enough drama for everybody's mama in here. So, not specifically in here, okay, I mean in general, in the world. So, where's that? Where is it? Where is it? Where do we draw the line? And here it is, all right? If that situation that you're working through with somebody or you yourself are working through, if that situation is drawing you to sin, it's folly. If it's drawing you to holiness, it's wisdom. Now, I understand that that is a very fine line, right? But here's the deal. That's what God requires us to walk. He requires us to walk this line between the wisdom of the world and the wisdom of God, right? And of course, the wisdom of the world being folly. And so when we're out there in the world, when we're dealing with people who are going through things, it's not that if someone has drama in their life, we just write them off because it's like, no, I don't have enough time for that, or I don't want to deal with that drama. But we have to look at those situations and say, is this driving me to holiness or is it driving me to sinfulness? And here's the deal. Wisdom says, this is driving me toward sin. I need to grab a hold of the steering wheel, even if it's somebody else's life, and I need to turn it so that we can go back in the right direction toward holiness, right? What does that look like? If you're having a conversation with somebody and that conversation devolves into gossip and slander and all that you grab the steering wheel of that conversation and you say, listen, we shouldn't talk about somebody or a situation like that. We should really talk about it like this. Is it hard? Yes. Is it awkward sometimes? Yes. But it's what God calls us to do. God calls us to run toward wisdom, and wisdom looks like running toward holiness. Folly is running toward sin. All right? So I wanted to clarify that because when they asked, I thought it was a really good question because, walking that line sometimes things can feel like we're falling into this gray area where I don't know what's going on in this situation, right? And now I have to navigate through it. So how do I know? That's how you know. And you know because you have the Holy Spirit and you have a conscience that bears witness to you. So if you're in that situation and you feel like this is going off the rails, guess what? It's going off the rails. All right? If you feel like it's going off the rails, you may already be off the rails. So drive it, turn the wheel, get back on the rails, right? Go the other way toward holiness, all right? So I want to tell you a story to talk about tonight because we're going to switch gears from wisdom and folly generally, and we're going to go into how our words specifically reveal our heart. So Solomon kind of starts off broadly, wisdom, folly, and now he's going to come down to what do we say, right? There's a story about a man who applied for a job, and this is before telephones, but before what we have, before cell phones, and he was applying for a job at a telegraph company. And he walked into this office, and in this office, there were dozens of people who were sitting there. They're all waiting to be called back to be interviewed for this job. That guy sat down and waited like everybody else, but after 2 minutes, he got up, he walked into the manager's office, and he came out smiling. Everyone's like, what are you doing? And he said, I got the job. And everyone's like, well, why did you get the job? We've been here longer than you. We didn't even get a chance to interview for this job. And he said, when we were sitting here, all these folks tapping, right, Morse code on the telegraph, he said, the message said, if you understand this, come in, the job is yours. Sometimes the true test of wisdom isn't how much noise we make, it's how well we listen and how carefully we speak. What we're going to see tonight in the rest of Ecclesiastes 10 is Solomon holding up a mirror again, like he's done many times. And this time, about how we work or about how we live. It's about how we speak and what our words reveal about what's going on in our heart. He's going to show us how we contrast between wise words that drive us toward holiness and foolish words. He's going to talk about the danger of being careless in the way that we speak. And we talked about this a little bit last week. We're going to get more into it this week. And he's going to challenge us to consider not only what we say, but how we speak to everyone. How do we speak to someone who's not as well off as we are? But also, how do we speak to somebody who's in authority over us? Someone who's in leadership, because those things matter. Because here's the deal, folks, when it comes to Christianity and the reality of the world, there's a law that exists in creation called the law of sowing and reaping. It's not just in farming, because we know that, because in 1 Corinthians, Paul uses it in terms of giving. Right? He says if you sow a lot, you'll get a lot. If you sow a little, you'll get a little. It's just the way that the world works. And the same thing is true with our words. If our words sow encouragement and building up, they're going to do just that. But the flip side is also true. If our words sow discord, if it sows not encouragement but discouragement, you know what it's going to reap? Broken hearts, broken relationships, broken lives. Our words are so powerful that the way we speak can bring healing. Simply by the words we say can bring healing. Now, I'm not saying you go to the doctor tomorrow and they're going to say, you feel better, and you're going to feel better. I mean that truly there are people in this room, even tonight, who have incredible things going on in their life. And you know what? Your words that you speak to them can either be a Band-Aid that wounds, or that binds that wound, or it can be a scalpel that opens it back up. Just as much as our words can heal, they can harm. Our words can glorify God, or they can expose our folly, our foolishness. And I would say more than any of that, our words reveal our heart. They reveal our heart. So if someone is sitting before you and they have massive things going on in their life and they're pouring their heart out to you, you listen and you carefully speak back to them the truth, but the truth in a way that builds them up and that encourages them. Because the law of sowing and reaping, right? We want to sow into the lives of other people encouragement and wisdom and insight. But we also want the world to see a true reflection of who we are. And we don't want to fake it. I don't want to fake it. I'm just going to tell you, I'm not good at faking it anyway, right? It's not a spiritual gift of mine, all right? It's just not. But the reality of that is sometimes it's really hard even for me to think back on conversations that I've had and realize that the words that I said were a reflection of my heart, and I hated it. I hated it. I hated the way that I talked to somebody. I hated the advice that I gave to somebody, right? I hated the way, not even necessarily sometimes what I said, the content, but the way I said it, right? And I'll just tell you, that's one thing my grandmother used to say to me all the time, and my mom still says it. It's not what you said, it's how you said it. And I look at that and I think, man, somebody out there is looking at that conversation and they're saying, man, I know a little bit about Eric's heart, and you know what? They're not wrong. They're not wrong. I'm in the process too. I'm in the sanctification process too. I'm working through things too. And we have to remember that the times we fail are not what define the reality of our heart. It's we look at the full picture and say, man, would you rather have somebody who never admits they're wrong or someone who says, I'm so sorry, I really wish I could have said that better. I really wish I could have done that better. And I know I can't take it back, and it may not fully heal the wound that I've caused, but I want you to know I recognize and I'm sorry. Listen to what Solomon says. The words of a wise man, this is verse 12, beginning verse 12. The words of a wise man's mouth win him favor, but the lips of a fool consume him. The beginning of the words of his mouth is foolishness, and the end of his talk is evil madness. A fool multiplies words, though no man knows what is to be. And who can tell him what will be after him? The toil, the work of a fool, wearies him, for he does not know the way to the city. Woe to you, O land, when your king is a child and your princes feast in the morning. Happy are you, O land, when your king is the son of the nobility and your princes feast at the proper time for strength and not for drunkenness. Through sloth the roof sinks in, and through indolence the house leaks. Bread is made for laughter, and wine gladdens life, and money answers everything. Even in your thoughts, do not curse the king, nor in your bedroom curse the rich, for a bird of the air will carry your voice, or some winged creature tell the matter. Now you may say, I have no idea what that means. Good thing is you're here, and we're going to talk about what all that means. So, verse 12, the words of a wise man's mouth win him favor, but the lips of a fool consume him. Solomon starts with a contrast. The wise man's words win favor, and that's exactly what you think it means. It doesn't mean, though, that he goes around flattering everybody, right? Flattery is a gift of fools, right? We understand that. When people in my life have come to me for the sole purpose of gassing me up, if you don't know what that means, right? It means blowing hot air, blowing smoke, all right? Rarely have those people been genuine, right? Maybe they thought they were being genuine, but the truth of the matter is, wise words and wise wisdom, it's speech that's measured, it's humble, it's gracious, right? Proverbs 15, verse 1, I said it last week, but it works here too, and so I'm going to mention it again in case you weren't here. A soft answer turns away wrath, right? It's that sort of speech. Wise speech is what makes relationships stronger. I'll tell you this, some of the strongest relationships I've had are with people that we have gone to the ring together. And I don't mean fighting together, I mean fighting each other, right? When we put on the gloves and we worked it out, and again, in case you don't know, I'm speaking figuratively, right? I don't just everyone I disagree with, I don't fight, all right? So just rest assured, you're not going to come to my office and I'm not going to punch you in the nose unless you deserve it. But it's wise words that build these sort of strong relationships. It's honesty, right? It's measured, humble, gracious. That's the sort of thing that builds relationships. And that's the sort of thing that makes us stronger. But the fool, his words consume him, right? The picture is his lips are his own undoing. The thing about it is, the picture that Solomon is painting right here is that the fool doesn't need enemies because the fool destroys himself. He doesn't need people talking trash about him because he runs his mouth so much that he's his own demise, right? I want you to imagine two people walking into a job interview, just to kind of give you an illustration of this. You have one guy who comes in and he listens to the questions. he answers them in a way that's humble, right? And when you ask him if he has any questions, he asks thoughtful questions. And he speaks respectfully about his previous jobs, even when he disagreed with them, but he's respectful. By the end of the interview, what do you feel like? You just had a conversation, not with a potential employee, but with someone who's a friend, someone who's a part of what you're doing. You say something like, man, we'd love to have someone like that on our team. And then the fool, the second guy, comes in, and this is the guy who he's a fast talker, right? We know what that means. He's a fast talker. He's interrupting. He's always looking to get his little, zinger in there. He brags constantly, right? He's gassing himself up, right? He's like, you don't need to call my ex-employer. Let me tell you what I did there, right? He takes jabs at his previous employers. He has the credentials, but his words are careless and he's arrogant. And by the time that interview is done, what do you say? Man, I don't want to do anything with somebody like that. Same qualifications, same opportunity, but their words revealed the type of people and the kind of people they really are. That's what Solomon's showing us in the first verse. Words don't just fill space. Words build reputations. Words open doors and close doors. They reflect what's happening in our heart. And the wise man's speech builds bridges. The fool burns them. Sometimes he burns down himself in the process. Why does Solomon start here? Because words matter. Our tone matters. And I'm going to say this in the world that we live in, and nobody wants to say this. Even in being a pastor, it infuriates me. I don't have a huge social media presence because I hate it. I'm on there. But social media comments matter. I think there are a ton of people, pastors occupying pulpits, that have disqualified themselves because of their social media presence and the way that they handle people online. The way that we have conversations in hallways matter. Careless venting matters. Because all of those things are not just speaking words, they're spiritual acts. And they either reflect wisdom or they expose folly. And that's just the first verse tonight. So buckle up. And the problem with the fool's words is not just their effect, right? It's their trajectory. The beginning of the words of his mouth is foolishness. And the end of his talk is evil madness. Solomon says the fool, at first his words seem silly, right? They seem lighthearted, maybe even to the point where you excuse them, right? We just kind of laugh it off. But as they keep talking, it spirals into what Solomon calls evil madness. You see, the progression of a fool doesn't stop. It doesn't stop. He keeps talking until his words become destructive. You see, a fool isn't happy venting. A fool isn't happy until that which he's venting about is burned to the ground and there's nothing left. Solomon says it starts harmless. It starts as silly, murmuring, harmless murmuring, gossip, grumbling, and it devolves into something that is spiritually toxic. Now you see why it's important that we go with the Lord and toe this line in the middle where we bring wisdom to the world and we don't allow ourselves or the people we care about to go into folly. Because it's not just senseless. It's not just harmless complaining. It's toxic. It's toxic. That's why James tells us that that our tongue is a fire, right? He calls it a world of unrighteousness, right? That's how powerful it is. It's like a snowball, right? No, not like if you go outside and you roll a snowball, it's not the same. But if you go on a cartoon, right, what happens, right? They take this little handful of snow, they roll it down the hill, and then all of a sudden, this tiny, cute little thing turns into this massive, destructive force. That's what Solomon says a fool is like. It starts as this little off-color joke that just doesn't sit right. And then it turns into this sort of church-splitting, heartbreaking, spiritually toxic garbage. And it may not even start with something crazy, right? It may just be someone who's careless in the way that they talk about something. It may be somebody who tells half-truths, right? And just in case you were wondering, that's everybody, because everybody has a perspective on a situation. I was telling Stan earlier, in law enforcement, I'll tell you what I learned most. There's this side, and the truth. And the truth has a little bit of this side and a little bit of this side, right? Why? Because we all see things from different perspectives. And it doesn't mean they're lying. It doesn't mean they're outright lying. But it does mean that they're telling half the truth. And we have to be able to recognize that sort of thing in the lives of people. Because eventually, those little things become evil madness. They become things that not only tear people down, but they dishonor God, they destroy relationships. And Solomon says here, you got to stop the snowball before it starts. And if we don't, our words may go further and cause more harm than we ever intended. I know it's easy for us to ignore the small talk of a fool, right? Just to write it off and laugh it off, but it grows. It always grows. It's a spiritual principle that Solomon is giving us. It's going to grow. And most of the time, by the time it's exposed, the damage is already done. Right? If we don't handle it, if we don't talk about it, if we don't deal with it, by the time it comes out, it's too late. The wrecking ball has already hit the wall. And while this foolish talk, it grows darker, it also grows longer. It grows longer. A fool multiplies words, though no man knows what is to be, and who can tell him what will be after him. The fool never stops talking. The fool never stops talking. He multiplies his word. He has an opinion about everything. Right? Now, I'm not saying that everybody who has an opinion about everything is a fool. I'm not saying that. Right? But this person knows how to fix every situation. Right? If there's someone like that in your life, they're a fool. Right? If they never have to think about how to handle the situation, the likelihood is they're not giving you wisdom, they're giving you foolishness. Right? Because we need to process things. We need to think about things. Somebody who always has advice, and they give you advice, you're like, I don't know about that. Right? That's a fool. And these type of people give advice about stuff they have no idea about. Right? I mean, no idea. And let me tell you, as a pastor, boy, I know some fools. Right? I know some fools. I met a whole bunch of them in my life. Right? When I was a law enforcement officer, same thing, right? Everybody knew the law better than me. Everybody knew what should have happened, what could have happened, what was going to happen, right? And then they were shocked when it didn't happen the way that they thought it was. Imagine that. That's a fool. Because Solomon says, nobody knows what's going to happen next. Do you? I don't, right? When I pray at the end of this thing and walk down, I have no idea what's going to happen, right? I don't. So to pretend like that is foolish. You know what a fool's like? This is what a fool's like. A fool is like a GPS. What do I mean by that? It's like a GPS that doesn't know where it's going. Right? You're driving down the road and it says, in 500 feet, take a left. And you take a left, and instead of turning into Kroger, you're at somebody's house. But the GPS, what about it? It was 100% confident, right? It wasn't like, yeah, in 500-ish feet, you may want to think about turning left, right? It didn't say in 500 feet, you need to look for the Kroger sign. No, that thing said in 500 feet, take a left, you'll have arrived at your destination. It sounded right. It was confident, but it had no idea where it was going. That's what a fool is. A fool, he talks about everything, but he knows nothing. He's good at guessing. He's really good at guessing, but his guesses are even wrong 99% of the time. It's literally pride. If pride had a verbal form, that's what a fool is. He has false confidence. He pretends to know only what God can know. He's always the first to speak and the last to listen. Unlike a wise person who has humility, who recognizes the limit of knowledge, right? Who says to you, man, I'm so sorry you're going through that. I don't know what I would do. I don't know how I would handle that, but I'm so sorry that that's what you're going through. And the crazy thing about the fool is that he can't even recognize that his speech not only wears everybody else down, but it wears him down too. The toil of a fool wearies him, for he does not know the way to the city. It's kind of funny and tragic all at the same time. Right? Solomon says the fool is worn out by his own confusion. He can't even find his way to the city. And in Solomon's day, like that's like the most basic thing, right? The most basic. You knew how to get to the city. Because guess what? In those days, you didn't have GPS, nor did you have an Uber, right? You were walking. So everybody knew how to get to the city because the city is where everything happened. So Solomon says, the fool is like this. The fool is that guy, and I'm going to use guy, and you'll understand in a second why I use guy. The fool is the guy who's standing on the corner with a map in his hand, and he is mad, saying terrible things to his wife, and he's walking in circles. He's blaming the road signs. He's blaming the public works. He's blaming everybody. And then a wise man walks by and says, hey, man, the map's upside down. That's a fool. He's worn out not because the journey is impossible, not because life is impossible, but because he refuses to stop and get directions. He works hard but goes nowhere because he doesn't have wisdom and he refuses to learn. Man, I could name names about people I worked with just like that. You know that you can be busy and still be lost? Because I don't know if you know this, but effort doesn't equal progress if you're going the wrong way. You know, you could leave tomorrow and go on vacation and drive 100 miles north and be on vacation, realizing you were supposed to be going to Florida. And so that vacation takes a terrible turn. Right? Because you haven't made any progress. In fact, you've just wasted hours of your vacation going the wrong way. The fool exhausts himself doing everything but what matters. His life is loud, it's aimless, it's worn out, and it's ultimately lost. Wisdom, on the other hand, gives us direction. Gives us direction. It simplifies life by helping us live according to God's priorities, loving Him, loving others, speaking truth, walking in humility. And if foolishness wears the individual out, what happens to the nation, right? And I'll just tell you, America, we know. Woe to you, O land, when your king is a child and your princes feast in the morning. Solomon goes from individual to national. When your leaders are immature, when they act like children, When rulers indulge themselves instead of governing responsibly, the nation suffers. The whole nation suffers. Feasting in the morning, Solomon says here, if you don't know what that means, it's a sign of self-indulgence. It means you don't care about anything else. It means that when they should have been preparing, they were partying. Immaturity in leadership results always in instability and moral decay. Welcome to America. Right? Welcome to America. Right? We found ourselves in this very situation over many, 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 many years. And we as a nation are on the brink even now of being morally bankrupt. Where we kill our children. And if we can't kill them, we think we should medically, surgically change them forever. That's an indictment against the nation, and it begins in leadership with immature leaders. I mean, imagine this, and this is only for illustration's sake, so don't fire me. Imagine next Wednesday night. If I said, if you have a chainsaw in the room, I want everyone to bring it next Wednesday night. And on Wednesday night, we walked in the gym, and I said, I want everyone in the gym to crank their chainsaw as it's running, and I want you to lay it in the middle of the gym, and we're going to let the Awana kids play in here while we all go into the service. What would happen? Chaos would be, putting it mildly. Injury, damage, yeah. But not because the tools are bad, but because they're in the wrong hands. Solomon says giving immature people authority, people who aren't ready, they're not trained, they're not disciplined, is like handing power tools to the kids. Right? Leadership, when it lacks maturity, leads to destruction every single time. It just is what it is. And this applies to nations. But it doesn't just apply to nations. Listen carefully. It applies to your home. It applies to churches. It applies to businesses. When leadership lacks wisdom, people suffer. When selfishness leads instead of character, the people pay the price. But thankfully, there's another verse. And Solomon says, not all leaders are like that. Happy are you, O land, when your king is the son of the nobility, your princes feast at the proper time for strength, not for drunkenness. So here's the contrast. When your leaders are trained, when they have restraint, when they have purpose, everyone benefits. These rulers feast at the right time and for the right reasons, not for self-indulgence, not in the morning, right? But to sustain their strength to serve. It's like an athlete, right? An athlete eats well, trains every day, stays focused, not to self-indulge, but to keep them strong for the game. He's not wasting time. He's preparing for what actually matters. And Solomon says that's wise leadership. Leaders who feast with purpose, not just for pleasure. They're disciplined, they're timely, they use their strength to serve other people. That's godly leadership, right? Godly leadership marked by self-control, humility, a desire to bless other people, right? And that's true whether you're a parent, a teacher, a deacon, an elder, a manager. Your leadership affects more than just you. And as a leader in this world, you are reflecting one of two things: wisdom or folly. Do you want people that you work with, people that you lead, to look at you and say, that man is a fool? Look at the way he leads. Look at the wisdom that he puts forth. It's foolishness. No, nobody wants that. But sometimes we have Stockholm Syndrome, right? We've been led by fools for so long. right? And I'm speaking politically right now. We've been led by fools for so long that it's hard for us. It's hard for us to see sensibility. And I'm not endorsing one political party or another. I'm saying for a long time and probably a long time in the future, we're going to be led by fools. But at least there's some sensibility at times that we can see. But even in that, it's hard for us to see it because we've been accustomed to immature, childlike leadership for so long. In your life, you may have been in the midst of folly and foolishness so long that wisdom is the hardest pill for you to swallow. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't try. It doesn't mean you should outright dismiss it. And here's the thing, folks, and the danger in all of this, whether it's national leadership or individual, is that foolishness can be dramatic and it can be public, but it can also be quiet. It can also be quiet. It can also come in the form of being passive. What do I mean? Verse 18, through sloth the roof sinks in. The house leaks. It's neglect. Listen to what I'm about to say. Whether it's a house or your life or ministry, things fall apart when you do not care for them. And laziness doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like being passive. Sometimes laziness is avoiding hard conversations. Ignoring the little compromises, assuming that somebody else is going to fix it. Solomon says, you can do that, fool. But I'm telling you, the cracks in the roof eventually collapse. The fool delays and deflects. The wise person maintains. The wise person inspects. The wise person acts. It's like living in a house and you see a water spot in your roof. Like, no one, at least I hope you don't, because right now I'm about to call you a fool, and that's not me calling you, the Bible calls you that. But I hope that after a rain, you look up and there's a giant water spot that wasn't there before, and you don't say, cool. We'll see what happens next time. I hope you don't do that. Because, cool, let's see what happens next time eventually leads to $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 worth of work. Something that could have been fixed maybe for hundreds of dollars now costs this exorbitant amount of money. When the leak grows and the wood rots, the ceiling eventually caves in. Solomon says to us, neglect is quiet, but it's dangerous. Listen, we can't be afraid to talk about the hard stuff. We can't. Because if we don't, that small thing that could have been fixed with one conversation turns into a spiritual nuclear bomb in the life of a church or in the life of a family. And this doesn't mean that it always pans out how we think. It doesn't mean the conversation always goes the way we think it ought to go. But the thing about it is, Solomon doesn't say you got to fix the world. Solomon says you got to address the leak. You got to deal with the foolishness. Because if you don't, foolishness breeds more foolishness and more foolishness. No one has ever been so foolish that eventually they just got it right. Right? What do I mean by that? I mean that somebody who lives idiotic in this world is always going to be idiotic. I understand a broken clock is right twice a day. I get that. But in the case of foolishness, it doesn't work the same. That little thing that we think we can just do nothing about. That's a spiritual leak, and if we ignore it, it will eventually collapse. Solomon says, don't wait till the roof caves in. Fix it. Have the conversation. Talk about it. One final perspective that he gives here in the last couple of verses, he gives before that, he gives this sort of proverb. Bread is made for laughter, wine gladdens life, money answers everything. It's a proverb about wisdom in everyday life. Here's the thing about it. Solomon isn't criticizing these things. He's saying these things have their place. They have a purpose. They bring joy. They meet needs. But we have to remember he is saying this in light of everything else he said in Ecclesiastes. And what does he say in the rest of Ecclesiastes? That these things aren't ultimate. That they're not evil, but they're not enough. They're not enough. They answer everything here in a worldly sense, but it doesn't satisfy the soul, right? Bread, wine, money, they're like tools in the toolbox. They're useful, they're helpful, and they're meant to be used wisely in the context of all this, but they're not the purpose of this life. I promise you, if you spend your life chasing food, wine, and money, you're going to be terribly disappointed at the end of your life because none of those things are going with you, and you will have left no legacy. You don't admire the toolbox. You use it to build something that lasts. And so Solomon is just saying that all of these things, they have their place, but wisdom teaches us that we use the things that God has given us for God's purpose. We don't live for them. That's wisdom. So we don't idolize what God has given us, but we enjoy what God has given us. We use it wisely. Even in your thoughts, verse 20, do not curse the king, nor in your bedroom curse the rich, for a bird of the air will carry your voice, or some winged creature tell the matter. Now, what is this about? You want to know some wisdom, and I'm going to drop it on you right here at the end. Even your private words matter. You think you're laying in bed with your wife having a private conversation, no one's ever going to hear it? It matters. It matters. Even a whisper in your bedroom can find its way to the wrong ears. You ever heard the phrase, well, a little bird told me? Have you ever, in the world that we live in, have you ever typed a text message out and you were frustrated as all get out when you typed it out and you hit send? And instantly you regretted it. Maybe you meant to delete it. You thought nobody would see it. Maybe you just typed out how you're feeling because you needed to vent, right? And then in your anger, you accidentally press send instead of delete, right? Or you save it in your notes and it goes to the cloud, right? And once it's out there, you can never take it back. Solomon says, even what we say in secret, it matters. Because I don't know if you know this, but your private thoughts have this weird way of becoming public. And it has public consequences. We have to guard our tongue, not just in public, but in private too. Why does it matter? Because our words in secret, the secret ones, reveal what's in your heart. It's what's in your heart. Not just what you say when you're out in public, but the things that you say when no one's there. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Even in those moments. So you can put on your church face. You can play the part. And still be a horrible person. Masquerading around as a man of God or a woman of God. Because the reality is God doesn't just listen to what we say out loud in public. He listens to what we say when no one else is around and here. So we need to be wise and guard our lips publicly and privately because we fear the Lord and we love our neighbor. Choose to speak life, not destruction. Choose to lead with humility, not indulgence. Choose to live with care, not complacency, because in the end, wisdom is not just about knowing the right thing. It's about choosing to live in the fear of the Lord, even when no one's watching and no one is listening, except Him. This has happened a few times in our history, but how many times has someone, like a political figure, given a press conference, right? And maybe given a great speech, and then stepped away from the podium and thinking it was over, absolutely shreds the people in the audience or someone in the audience. He didn't realize the mic was on. And in the next few seconds, what happens? Everyone in the room, everyone watching on TV, heard exactly what he really thought about people in that room. And all of a sudden, everything else he just said from that podium meant nothing. What do you remember? What was called on the hot mic, right? That private comment, the real voice. And that moment, most of the time, becomes national news. Solomon is telling us every mic is hot. Every moment of our life that we live and move and breathe in this world is a hot mic moment when it comes to the Lord. There's no off the record. There's no backstage. There's no side conversation that God doesn't hear. And one day, folks, whether you like it or not, we will give account. We'll give account not only for every deed done in the body, but for every careless word that we spoke with our tongue. Every one. That's why this is so important for us, especially as the people of God, because the way that we live is a reflection of our Savior. It's a reflection of this church. And I don't want us to hide away from the hard conversations, but what I want us to do is in wisdom have hard conversations. In wisdom navigate the hard conversations that lead us to holiness and not to foolishness, not to folly. And it begins here. It begins here. Every time it begins here in our heart. Any questions?